joining me here today. Bernard de Clercq, you are Group Head of EU Affairs at Elia Group. And we just talked about energy islands in Denmark, but you in Belgium, you've got your own energy islands, don't you?
Well, we don't have it yet, but we're planning it.
You're planning it, yeah, obviously.
And I think there's even a running joke with the Danes. I think they can claim that they will have the biggest energy island, whereas we can say that we're going to have the first energy island. While I'll speak, I hope you can concentrate looking at the movie and listening to me at the same time, because we're going to show some images of the Belgium energy island on the screen. But some statistics here, indeed, it will be world first, as said by the previous speaker. So it's an artificial island from concrete structure. And it's not a reality, a dream. It's not something far off. It's something that we actually start building as of next year. We'll be 45 kilometers offshore, and will interconnect 3.5 gigawatt of Belgium offshore wind generation on the one hand side, and on the other hand side, be the landing point for two international interconnections. One with the UK, the Nautilus project, and one with Denmark, the Triton Link project, which actually will connect the Danish artificial island with the Belgium artificial island, so that it really becomes, let's say, a centerpiece of the meshed offshore grid of the future.
Sounds like a great project indeed, but there are challenges, right? Especially when you connect grids from different countries with each other.
Yeah, so I think that the engineers that within our company are thrilled about such projects, because being the world first, indeed, it entails quite some challenges for the energy island. Be it the tidal effect, the effect of the waves, the harsh conditions offshore, the impact on the environment as well. Maybe Antonella will elaborate later on that one as well, but we're trying also to look on how can we make a nature-inclusive design of the island so that it has actually a positive impact on the environment rather than a detrimental one. So a whole lot of engineering challenges. The other challenges are then more indeed of a regulatory or a financial nature. There are more partners involved. The island, but also the hybrid interconnectors, to which the previous speaker alluded to, for which the TSOs on the one hand side, developing the grid, need to collaborate closely with the wind developers, and to ensure that the business case is sufficiently interesting for both ends is one of the challenges which need to be unlocked in order to build those kind of projects indeed.
There's also that problem that if you have got different support schemes, right, in the different countries, then it's kind of difficult to figure out how to, what to pay for the energy, for example, when you've got this energy island, which is actually a wind farm.
Yeah, well, so I think I think it's important to distinct the business cases. So for the TSOs, it should be about a fair, regulated return, which is then indeed recovered via the tariffs. For the wind generators, they're not regulated entities; they're private companies, so they make the proper business cases. They count on income by selling their electricity, but indeed, if there's still a deficit for their business case, then they look to other support schemes such as CFDs, Contract for Difference, and others that can help to unlock the business case.
And apart from such projects, can you tell us a bit more about how European countries are cooperating when it comes to the grid of the future? I understand there are different initiatives on a European level, on an international level.
Yeah, so clearly one part of the puzzle lies within ENSOE, which is the sector association of European TSOs, who have the legal mandate to develop a future-looking network development plan, onshore but equally offshore. For the first time, they will develop offshore network development plans as of next year. But apart from that, there's also the Northeast Energy Cooperation between member states, different energy ministers sitting together. But more recently, we saw also voluntary initiatives. And I think it's a tendency since a year that not only energy ministers, but even heads of states are concerned with energy matters. There was the Ashberg conference a year ago in Denmark. There was the Ostende conference just 2 months ago in Belgium, for which President Macron was also present, for which 9 countries around offshore, around the North Sea, came together to discuss the challenges of offshore and how to unlock it with politics, but also with industry and some civil society and NGOs also being present to really see how can the North Sea be developed as the green powerhouse of the future.
And what are the hurdles when it comes to international cooperation?
Without a doubt, there are quite a few. Maybe to pick one, I think the more international you go, the more the aspect of collaboration again becomes important. And then maybe one specific point is, without going into too much the technicalities, but is the cross-border cost allocation. More and more we see in the development of an offshore international grid that the benefits of such interconnectors, they go beyond the two hosting countries, beyond the two countries actually building those interconnectors. The reply from the European Commission is then also to look to which other countries have a benefit of such projects and to make them actually pay also part of that infrastructure. Just to put it in some more practical terms, it would mean that the project developed Belgium, Denmark, if it has a benefit on Italy, that also the Italian citizens would need to pay for that project. Probably not the most easiest thing to do, whereas we do see there's a need and a gap, let's say, to finance such projects. We rather believe in having more European funding, like we had for the energy islands. We had 100 million funding from the Europe's Recovery and Resilience Fund. Which was very efficient and very pragmatic, and that is something to emphasize. I hope it will be put on the drawing afterwards, but speed is key, and we don't have time for lengthy discussions and much exchanges. If we want to reach the 2030 targets in terms of infrastructure, that's tomorrow, literally. So let's collaborate, let's all go forward, and let's make sure that we can actually build what is needed to be built in order to unlock the green transition.
Well, let's hope it goes forward fast.
Thank you. I hope so.
Thank you, Bernard de Clercq from Elia Group. International cooperation is also key for you, Gros de Saint-Martin. You are Director for Strategy and Offshore Grid Developments at French TSO RTE. But can you first talk us through your projects that you're working right now on a French level, given that, as we heard throughout this conference, France has really ambitious offshore wind energy goals?
Yeah, maybe first the specificity of France and of RTE is that we are present in 3 different sea basins, the North Sea, the Atlantic, and the Mediterranean. So our approach is really a step-by-step approach. We commissioned our first wind farm last year, and that was very good. For last winter it was difficult with low availability of nuclear, low availability of hydro as well because of the drought. So having that additional wind farm, 500 megawatt, was really important for the security of supply in France. Now we have 2 additional wind farms which have been made ready for energization this year, and that would 2 other wind farms of 500 megawatt each. That would also be important for next winter, maybe even for this summer. We'll see. Third step is the next 2 years we'll connect 5 additional wind farms, 3 floating, 5 additional wind farms, 3 floating and 2 commercial wind farms.
2 bottom fixed.
Yeah, 2 bottom fixed. That is our program. So you can see that we speed up as we go. Up till now, all the wind farm connections have been radial. So you can see that's kind of small is beautiful. But after a while, when you add many small wind farm connection in AC, you get too much landing points, and it gets more difficult to accommodate them into the grid. So next step is scaling up a bit, linking big, first step. That's the title of our session. So first thing is for floating wind farms, still in AC. The state launched 2 years ago tenders for our first commercial wind farms in France, 250 megawatt each. And they said that, well, the second step could be additional 500 megawatt for each of these wind farms. So what we did in RTE was that we anticipated that, although the situation was uncertain. We said, okay, we'll consult, we'll carry out the studies, we'll prepare the procurement for shared connections for 700 megawatt each. That allows us to reduce costs and to reduce spatial impact, so reduce the impact on the environment for these projects.
For now, we know that France will add at least 40 gigawatt until 2035, right? 2050.
2050, yes. 18 gigawatt in 2035 and 40 at least.
Yes, at least. And that as you're saying, it could be even more. What kind of impact could that have, will that have on your activity?
It's a quite huge impact. It was Agnès Pannier-Runacher said yesterday. 40 gigawatt in 2050 is a floor, and will probably be more. But already the 18 gigawatt target in 2035 is a challenge. It means that between 2025 and 2035, we'll have to add 6 times more offshore wind to the grid, which is really a change of scale. So in order to achieve that, we have set up a new strategy, which we call the SMS strategy. That means standardization, massification, and simplification. So I will explain that in a few words. Standardization is that since these future offshore wind farms will be further from shore, but also further from the grid, we'll need to go to the 400 kV grid, whereas before we could go to the 225 grid, which is closer to the coast. Therefore, all connections will need to be DC. So we standardize them, 320 or 525 in DC, with standardized cables sections for all wind farms. What does that allow us to do? That will allow us to go out with large framework agreements. You probably saw what TenneT has done. That is 30 billion euros framework agreements. We will do the same thing with a medium scale, not as big. And we're preparing that in order to anticipate and prepare all these future connections, knowing that France is scaling up, but all the other European countries and even the US and Asia are doing the same thing. So tension is very tight on our value chain. So in order to get the right spots, the right timelines for installation and manufacturing, but also engineering, we'll have to start early. And the last item in the SMS strategy is simplification, in order to allow the manufacturers to smoothen up the manufacturing capacities and use their own ways. We simplify our requirements. And last but not least, this would not be possible without sustainability requirements. We need to get acceptance. We need to comply with our net zero impact on biodiversity target. So therefore, we have also a whole set of sustainability criteria that we put in place, like nature inclusive design that Bertrand explained. So that's our challenge for the coming years.
I suppose international cooperation in that context is really crucial also because, as you said, there's a lot of strain on the supply chain. You need to figure out when the company is actually available or able to provide all the pieces, right?
Yeah, exactly. So international cooperation is important in order to align on specifications, on products, to allow the supply chain to manufacture the same thing again and again. Replicability is really key. So we do that via bilateral agreements, via informal discussions. Tonight, for instance, RT hosts a meeting of international project directors from the other TSOs. Elia will be there, but also almost all the other TSOs who are active in offshore wind. And we're happy to do that. And one of our discussions will be how to standardize. This is an informal forum, but there are also more formal forums that, like NSOE, which was mentioned, or Eurobar, which is another initiative where we try to put standardization issues forward.
Thank you very much, Claude de Saint-Martin, for all that insight. When it comes to cooperation, environmental matters, the environmental impact is really also an important topic. Antonella Battaglini, you're CEO of the NGO Renewables Grid Initiative, of which both Elia and RTE are members. Why is it so crucial to talk biodiversity when it comes to grid structures?
Thank you very much for the invitation. So we have heard that we are going to build a massive amount of energy infrastructure at sea, and not only at sea. And we have also heard that we need to do it in a sustainable way. Sustainability is not only referring to reducing carbon emission, but actually refers to support biodiversity as a whole and protect nature. the more infrastructure we build, the higher the potential impacts. And today, if you want to build something somewhere, you need a permit. Part of the permitting procedure is an environmental impact assessment. There have been, in recent efforts, a tendency to believe that reducing environmental legislation and deregulate environmental laws would speed up the permitting process. But we have realized that actually this will not be the case, because impacts would increase public opposition. I must say that even when the infrastructure is far away from mainland, there are different forms of oppositions, and these are very, very fierce. So the idea that we go at sea and we have it easy, that's not really the case. Among the loud opponents right now is the fishing industries, and you know that Brexit is an outcome of fishing struggles. So things can really happen. The European Commission has put in place a very interesting package to allocate space. This is the process that is covered by the maritime special plans, where every single country needs to submit their plans, and this is obviously a first step to find suitable locations. Of course, project developers, not only the TSOs, but also the wind developers, need to collaborate to find a solution that have the least impact, but also agree on mitigation and restoration measures, so that indeed all the amounts of infrastructure can be built in time without delays.
If I understand that right, one very crucial point is political commitment, right? Do you feel that there is enough political commitment to really take into account biodiversity when going big, linking big?
Well, we have seen that there is political commitment. However, this political commitment seems to take place in different circles. Last year there was the Montreal Cumming Agreement for the protection of the high seas, foreseeing 30% of protected areas. This week we have had a discussion in the European Parliament and Council about the restoration law, which was tabled by the European Commission. The restoration law was highly debated, and there have been, especially from the right wings party, central right, an attempt to push it back. Currently, the restoration law is going ahead. So certain groups definitely do have a commitment to restore nature. And I would like to bring your attention to the fact that the European Central Bank published a report a couple of weeks ago pointing to the fact that European economies and European industries strongly rely on biodiversity and ecosystem services. So in a certain way, we have no easy solution. We cannot just build energy infrastructure and forget nature or people. We need to do all of it together.
Do you think that the different players in the market are more conscious of that? Is the approach towards biodiversity, to protect biodiversity, getting better? Are we learning a lot, or are there still a lot of hurdles to do this in the right way?
Some actors are becoming more and more aware. I would like to mention that Elia and Elia are definitely aware of the project, also because they've been working with us at RGI, so they didn't have a chance to run away from that. But a lot of project developers don't really have this in their priority list. And this, of course, is bringing a lot of risks that many companies simply do not see and cannot fully assess. Going ahead, becoming more knowledgeable about the financial risks of not taking environmental protection in consideration needs to change dramatically and very quickly. Today, when you want to access capital in the financial markets, sustainability criteria are very strict, and they will continue to be strict. And we see that there are stringent laws that are put in place, and so there will be accountability, and we will see a lot of court cases coming up. So it is better to build well, especially because if you build well, you can build a lot. But if you build badly, you won't be able to build as much as it is needed.
You just mentioned the legislation in place. Do you really think that there are a lot of people, or who will these people be, like normal local residents who will sue operators saying you haven't taken into account biodiversity, or how will that work, do you think?
Well, it will not be you and me as citizens or individuals, but class actions is a reality also in Europe. And of course, there are environmental groups that they are very good at doing that. They only do that. So I think there is a need to raise awareness, not only on the challenges, but the opportunities as well. Because for European industries, for good industries, taking care of the environment and following the current legislation becomes a competitive advantage. We have seen, especially in the offshore space, but also in the wind space and solar, generally a race to the bottom line, to decreasing cost. And this has been very heavy for some manufacturers. So the countries like the Netherlands and Denmark now that have adopted non-price criteria, where grid access, but also biodiversity and other criteria are included, become a competitive advantage for European industries. And indeed, Wind Europe and all their members support very much these non-price criteria.
Gros de Saint-Martin, Bernard de Clercq, do you want to react to that? Do you agree with that? How are your companies preparing for this challenge to take into account biodiversity?
Yeah, I can react. We're preparing ourselves very seriously. The first thing is to get up to speed regarding marine knowledge. There is a large space out there, and some people say that we know the moon better than we know the oceans. Therefore, RT is carrying out currently 17 different R&D projects to get more knowledge about the marine environment and the impact of offshore activities. In our case, connecting to the grid. And we are also discussing with partners on the idea of having an offshore substation which would be multifunctional, not only transmitting electricity, but also be in a kind of laboratory in order to observe the environment with a lot of monitoring devices. So we're going to standardize that for each offshore substation. We'll have a set of monitoring devices that will help us to monitor what happens once you put the grid in place. Do the positive impacts that we expect really take place, or are they negative? That is something we'd like to monitor very strictly in the years to come.
What about you, Bernard de Clercq?
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think it's difficult not to agree. I think we have an energy crisis and a climate crisis at the same time. And electrification and connect to renewables is one of the best answers to tackle both. And let's make sure that we do both exactly at the same time. It's not one or the other. It can be both. And then I come back with the buzzword. collaboration. I think associations like RGI are very helpful to understand one another, the TSO community, the NGO community. There are other vested interests in the seas as well, military, fishery. So even if it's offshore, far away from people's houses, there's still a lot of opposition. Let's make sure that we tackle them all and that we indeed can contribute to what needs to be done within the very strict timelines which are being set forward by the Commission as well.
Great.
Yeah, maybe I can just add one thing, because this year in France we will have a kind of enormous laboratory for stakeholder dialogue on environmental issues at sea. We'll have public debates on all our sea basins in order to identify the areas where we'll implement future offshore wind farms and areas for the connection to the grid between now and 2040. So this will be a big exercise. So dialogue is really key in order to achieve both implementation of new offshore wind and the grid,
Okay.
offshore and onshore, and to protect biodiversity.
Yeah, and I want to add that there is always a dry side in the conversation of the offshore. So the more we build at sea, the more we need to build on land. And these two have to go hand in hand. And also maybe worth for this audience to know that RGI has initiated a collaboration that we call OCEAN, the Offshore Coalition for Energy and Nature, where not only the TSOs, the grid operator, climate and environmental NGOs come together, but also the entire wind supply chain. And in this club, we really look at finding the solutions for doing exactly what I said, everything at the same time. And on this note, I would like to mention that we are also planning to launch a pledge at the COP in Dubai at the end of the year. So to give a global stage to energy and nature jointly and show that there are solutions and there are opportunities for doing them together.
Thank you very much. We have Fanny, who's been taking notes in the forms of a drawing of this interesting discussion. Oh, yeah. Okay, so she combined, obviously, the discussion beforehand with this panel talking about the grid of the future, positive impact on sea life, how France is scaling up, and how international cooperation is really crucial. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.